Chapter 29. Syntholo had propped her up on a ledge on the far side of the tub before drawing her a bath. Kayla passed control to Kivaza as she opened a connection to the bridge. Tyrell answered almost immediately. Tyrell, Kivaza said, switch me to ICD mode. I need to call my Tejmare. I'll patch you into the long-distance array, Tyrell chuckled. Give my regards to Pinky. She sighed longingly as she opened up her contact list. She didn't expect a reply, so she composed a quick message using the thought-to-text feature and selected the send option. Her heart raced as she heard a tone signaling the receipt of a message. It read, "The esteemed Lady Cyanide is currently attending an official function and is not available at this time." Kivaza frowned darkly. Moments later, she received a second message. It was from an unknown sender. She eyed it suspiciously but decided to take the chance. It included a contact information packet and simply said, "Hello, Princess." Kivaza smirked. That wasn't much of a message, but she had a cyberpath on staff. If the message was a problem, he could take care of it. She accepted the contact packet. She opened up a call as soon as she realized it was Prask. "I saw your message," Prask said in his usual formal tone. "I was instructed to monitor for additional transmissions from you. I've been instructed to assure you that you've not been forgotten and are in Lady Cyan's thoughts." "Not this again," Kivaza grumbled. "I just need a little advice. Please, can I just talk to you, like a person? I just don't know how to process this. I wish I could talk to Cyan, but I just need to talk to someone that's not part of my crew. I really need some advice." Without saying a word, Syntholo stepped out of the room to give her privacy. "I don't think that would be appropriate," Prask said in a slow, deliberate tone as if he was conveying something of vital importance. "I did see the message, but I cannot advise you. There is a prerequisite level of trust required to make such an interaction meaningful and productive." "I think I understand," Kivaza said. "Please let my Stripe Inspector know that I've been invited to meet with Mistress Kaylani. We'll be heading to Dominion Space by way of the Pilth Stargate. I hope the resorts of Arosha are as wonderful as I've been told." "I will," Prask assured her. "Enjoy your trip, Princess." "I won't," Kivaza snickered. "I'm allergic to gate travel, but thank you." "I understand," Prask said. "I will pass along your message with precision." He disconnected the call. Kivaza worried that Prask may have thought she was giving him some coded message to pass along. She was just hoping her Tejmare would join her there if she could get time away from her duties. "I've switched you back to normal mode," Tyrell said over her earpiece. "Long-distance communication is unavailable inside the slipstream corridor. I'll monitor for additional deep space transmissions until then, and let you know if anything else comes in."
"Thank you," Kivaza said as she passed control back to Kayla. "Let Syntholo know I'm done with my call," Kayla said. "Jake should be contacting you shortly. Get him whatever he needs." "Will do," Tyrell said. "How much longer will we be waiting here?" "This system is a major transport hub," Tyrell said. "It will be no less than 6 hours. I can let people move in front of us in the lineup if I have to. Syntholo mentioned your conversation from earlier. Take whatever time you need to decide what you want to do about the kid. We can't leave without you. So, no worries there. After all the effort getting that junk in his head sorted, I was hoping things would work out for you too, but it's not my call. Just make sure you do what's right for you, okay?" "I will," Kayla reassured him. Syntholo re-entered the room moments later, with a bottle in one hand and a sponge in the other. "What's that?" Kayla asked with mild concern. Bubbles, Syntholo smiled broadly as he rushed over to the tub to check the temperature and water level. I had Tyrell check the ship inventory while you were on that call. Tell me that's not some floral scented. Kayla grumbled. Actually, it is, Syntholo said. Lavender is a deal breaker, Kayla insisted. Judging from the former owner's armoire wardrobe, I'm guessing her taste in bubble bath was the only thing vanilla about her. I thought you said it was floral. Last time I checked, vanilla orchids were still flowers, Syntholo said as if he were scolding her. Unless the indomitable Lady Darkseid has declared it simply isn't so. Yeah, but that smells fine, Kayla giggled, a little nostalgic, actually. I traveled with Thallo for a few months. I knew she wasn't telling me everything, but I never suspected she was keeping her secret stash of bubble baths from me. I asked her why the bathroom smelled funny every time she used it, and she would just tell me a lady must have their secrets, but bubble bath? Really? She nearly had me convinced that she developed some psionic ability to make her smell like sugar cookies. Syntholo's professional facade faded away as he began to laugh, softly at first, but before long he was laughing loudly enough that it felt oddly comforting. He stirred the soap into the bathwater until it had built up a nice froth. Check the temperature, Syntholo chuckled softly. I think your cookie is ready. She reached in her hand to test the water. It wasn't quite as hot as she'd prefer, but it felt nice, and she could heat it more with her elemental abilities if needed. The bubbles were dense enough and the water deep enough that it would have been comfortable for someone who was far more modest. This was the first time it had occurred to her just how much of an exhibitionist she'd become since her transformation. She smiled to herself as she thought back to the day that she stripped in that decon stall. She liked her new look and was eager to share her moment of ostentation. Shinji was there, and sure, his personality had been modeled after Vance, but that wasn't a factor to her at the time. Anyone who didn't give her the creeps would have sufficed in her moment of conceit. Syntholo lifted her to the edge of the tub, unbound her tails, and helped her remove her bra before lowering her gently into the warm, sudsy water. It amused her that under other circumstances the entire situation would have seemed almost romantic, and could easily have seemed amorous if she considered him the least bit appealing in his subterran form. Thank you, Kayla said softly as she felt the warmth of the water loosening her muscles. He positioned her so her shoulders were resting against the back of the tub, her bent, barely visible under the suds. Lady Darkseid, are your tails comfortable? Syntholo asked. Please, she said as her two souls merged effortlessly, call me Kali. As in Kali Mata, the Dark Mother, Syntholo teased. Do you mind if I call you Kali Ma, after the kind and beautiful goddess, for now? We can leave the creation and destruction for some other time, if that's with you. Just Kali, Kayla said as she mentally berated herself for blushing. He wasn't shy like Shinji. He was bold like Cyan, yet his tone of voice hadn't seemed the least bit flirtatious. Flattery for its own sake was a new concept to her. If at any point you feel any pain, discomfort, or arousal, please let me know so I can cease what I'm doing immediately. My intention is to provide comfort and help you relax. His words seemed more recited than spoken. Syntholo watched for changes in her facial expression as he lathered up the sponge. If you'll permit me, he said before starting to wipe down her shoulders. She nodded slightly. Was I supposed to say something? Kayla asked. I know you said in the Dominion consent is king, but if you're going to ask permission every time you... She stopped as he started washing her arm. Syntholo paused as he explained, facial expressions, muscles tightening, movements. Both subtle or reflexive, unexpected sounds. Someone with proper training must be astute, and be aware of all these things. In this case, you stopped talking and the muscles in your upper arm twitched. At moments like this, I will verify continued consent and check on your mental state. You just caught me off guard, Kayla said softly. You can continue. You said you wanted to talk. Syntholo resumed. If may be more accurate to say I had the impression you needed to talk. I will endeavor to listen and only interrupt as needed to ensure my understanding is adequate. You're going to ask me what happened with Shinji, Kayla grumbled. When you're ready, Syntholo said warmly. You were trained to do this. Is that normal for scouts? Not at all, Syntholo chuckled softly. I wasn't born a scout. I'm also a diplomatic envoy, but these are stations you must earn. I spent a great deal of my young life working my way through a vast assortment of societal roles. I had a head start compared to many members of our society due to my parentage, but I still had to earn my current station. Wealthy family? Kayla asked. Wealth is a poor measure of character, and often adversely affects a person's inner nature. Our nation is wealthy due to our extensive tourism industry, and the nature of the products we are known for. My mother was a well-respected chocolatier, and my father worked as a sansuk at a Shamfarian-style bathhouse on Glutnam. He paused, seeing the confusion on her face. He bathed customers, much like I'm bathing you now. Kayla nodded. He finished her right arm, moved to the other side of the tub, and started on the left. So, your father helped you get a leg up? Syntholo smiled warmly. To become a sansuk, you must have the mental discipline to not become aroused while being surrounded by, and coming in contact with, naked people. Needless to say, it's not the sort of profession that agrees with puberty, particularly in the case of males. It's certainly not for everyone. Those most suited for the job tend to have non-traditional means of arousal or none at all. I did work with my father for a few years, but I worked with my mother for the majority of my youth. When you're a child, developing the discipline to not taste test everything is a major accomplishment. Kayla giggled. He finished her second arm and asked, torso or skip to the legs, for now? Kayla paused to consider. Her breasts weren't that sensitive, except for a spot on each side where her brown and black stripes met. Cyanide had discovered it their first night together and had been merciless in her treatment of the nearly erogenous patch of flesh. He was waiting silently for her answer. Upper body, just be careful on the sides. I'm a little ticklish, Kayla said, hoping he wouldn't be able to tell she wasn't being honest. She was certainly reactionary, but not actually ticklish when you find the exact spot. Are you comfortable with telling me what happened with the young man, yet? Syntholo asked as he resumed his task. I'm feeling more comfortable, Kayla admitted, but I think I'd like to know how your parentage helped you. I just don't understand how being the son of a woman who makes candy and a father who bathes people makes a difference. I'm trying to give you a good impression of the Dominion, Syntholo admitted falteringly. I have reservations about going into detail about laws specific to males of my species. It's not representative of our culture, and could easily lead to misunderstandings. Kayla smirked and cocked an eyebrow. I thought your species was nearly extinct, even if I have met for so far. If you grew up on Nulduni, you'd think Pa Shai were common, despite their entire population estimate numbering under 20,000, Syntholo said. If you spent your entire life in Chalag space, near the Urgal star cluster, you might not know subterrans even exist, unless you met one on their homeworld, but not many people visit Tazalam. I get the point, Kayla snickered. There are 2 small settlements, but we keep a low profile. The women are important for preserving the species. Males are completely useless. You're obviously far from useless. I meant for continuing the species. Regardless of what a female lycanthrope breeds with, the offspring is always the same species as the mother. Males are genetically neutral. Kayla continued to relax as he rubbed down her chest and stomach. What does any of this have to do with? Syntholo stopped what he was doing before explaining. We have stiff penalty for violation of our consent laws. We do require full scans from specially trained telepaths for final verification. Due to technologies and knack abilities that can deceive the senses, we require genetic evidence to prove guilt in crimes which call for the death penalty. Syntholo paused. It's most often death of personality, not true death. Male Laika are genetically neutral. We can't be identified by DNA test in cases of crimes against the queendom or even simple paternity tests. Female Laika, like my mother, aren't a problem, but there are a number of crimes it's impossible for our government to prosecute males of my species for. What was your father? Shamfarian. How do they deal with people like you? Most are handed over to the Midnight Fellowship to be conscripted into service there. Syntholo resumed bathing her as he continued to speak. By the time I reached the proper age of conscription, I had proven my ability to withstand various temptations and had been around naked people often enough that I had demonstrated my strength of character. After my final evaluation, they offered me the opportunity to join the emissary scout caste, and I took it. I've been back in Kailani space less than a dozen times since then. The last time was for my mother's funeral around 20 years ago. How old are you? Wait. That won't mean much if I don't even know the normal lifespan of a lycanthrope. Callie smiled weakly. Our average lifespan is around 260 to 280, but some have made it to just the other side of 300. I'm in my mid-60s. Tyrell was tickled to find out I was 10 years older than him. Please don't tell him I'm still young by my people's standards. I won't. Callie giggled. Syntholo stopped moving his hand, which was wiping down her stomach. No, you're fine, she insisted. I think it's your turn to talk, Syntholo said. Hips and sides all right? Hang on, Kayla said as she heated back up the water. Would you like more suds? Syntholo asked. I don't mind being seen, Kayla shrugged. From what you were saying earlier, I have the feeling there's no way I could turn you on, no matter what I do, so no need. His left eye twitched slightly and the right side of his jaw seemed to tighten for an instant. Kayla wasn't sure how to interpret his response. She'd clearly hit a nerve. For a split second, he'd come close to triggering a response from her combat empathy. She hadn't meant to offend him. He hadn't shown any signs of interest in her. Kayla considered asking him about it, just to make sure everything stayed uncomplicated. Explaining her odd attraction to his shifted form in contrast to her complete disinterest in his Terran form was a conversation best avoided. Unless... I just want to make sure I understand this. You have a Terran form and a bonded form, but you can impregnate any species? Almost, Syntholo said cautiously. As long as they're a carbon-based species that uses the standard 4 nitrogenous bases, yes. That rules out all antihominids and a few other species. I'm sure some would require artificial insemination due to biological incompatibilities. Why do ask? Just curious, Kayla said in a neutral tone. So, if a male Laika impregnated a bestial species like a Lupian, the offspring would be Lupian? Syntholo agreed as he wiped down her left side down just past the curve of her hip. What about a cold-blooded reptilian species like a Galgisham? The mother would require natal care, but yes, it's possible and the offspring would be Galgisham. Kayla feigned thoughtfulness before asking the question she'd been waiting for. What about a species that has a more complex genome like Lamentix? Syntholo looked her in the eyes and grinned. The offspring would be a genocidal abomination, or in other words, still Lamentis. Kayla was startled that he'd used the classical pronunciation of the species name, which had long fallen out of common usage. My Tejmare is Lamentic, Kayla said, speaking on behalf of her other self. Is that going to be a problem? The ancient conflict between our races was resolved long ago. My people lost, but as children we're still told the stories of the Lam Auntie's death squads rounding up entire populations of lycanthropes to be exterminated. We called them the burnings. We don't keep these stories to breed hatred, but so we never forget a past, which only exists today as blackened lines on official documents. It was a Laika in Fellowship space that penned the treaty which prohibits the genocide of newly discovered sapient species. We may not be able to undo the past, but we can strive to prevent it from repeating itself. Never again. The skin on his arm seemed to ripple slightly while he was speaking, as if he was struggling with the instinct to change forms. Kayla rested her hand on his arm until he fully regained his composure. It was a bizarre sensation, like his skin was simultaneously trying to fold and unfold. Was that a yes or a no? Syntholo inhaled deeply before answering. If they'd judged my people on an individual basis, things would have been very different. I will endeavor to see your Tejmare beyond her ancestry, but that's the best I can offer. Fair enough, Kayla said as she leaned back and allowed him to continue bathing her. Syntholo moved to the other side of the tub and started cleaning her right side from her ribs down to the curve of her hip. Thank you for your honesty and for sharing that with me, Kayla said with a warm smile. Telling you what happened isn't easy for me. I'm still trying to work through it. I just don't know where to start. It's not as simple as, Shinji did a thing. It's... Wait, that won't make any sense. I'd have to damn near tell you my life story to contextualize what happened. This is a nightmare scenario. It would be simple if I could just drag you into a mindscape, but I'm not sure how to do that with someone that doesn't have soul touch. I considered trying to do it with Shinji using psionics, but he's not strong enough. Maybe with mystrionics, it may be possible, if we can get into a state of lucid dreaming. You have a deep purple power signature, so I don't even know what your ability is if that's even what I was seeing. Not that it matters. Bringing someone into a mindscape feels so intimate. Just do your best, Syntholo said with an odd lopsided smile. We'll keep your mindscape idea as a last resort. I'd prefer to maintain my current form. His answer was confusing. Laika certainly didn't have soul touch. What was his knack? She took a deep breath and struggled for a way to summarize. I programmed him to be like my brother. While we were being intimate, it unlocked a suppressed memory from when I first met my brother. I was made through cloning. There were too many cooks, but one of the groups involved designed me to love and be obedient to my brother. A memory connected to that got triggered. In the memory, I was wearing nearly the same thing I was wearing in the real world. He doesn't have my brother's memories, only his personality. He wants me to give things a chance, but I just can't look at him now without seeing my brother. It's just... No. What did your brother do to you? I don't know what memories my shadow is still hiding, Kayla responded without thinking, but I don't think he actually did anything to me, and she would have killed him if he tried. She who? Syntholo asked as he rested his hand on her right tail, waiting for her approval. That's fine, she said as her tail muscles shifted slightly. My shadow, Kivaza, Kayla said, pausing as he gently pulled her tail up out of the water and started massaging soap into her fur. I'm complicated. I have two souls inside me. It's confusing to me sometimes. If you ever do attempt that mindscape thing, Syntholo mused, you two will just have to introduce yourselves properly. I may not have two people inside me, but I do know a thing or two about duality. When I was growing up, I had a few people in my life that only liked me when I was in one form or the other. Kayla bit her lower lip as he rinsed the soap out of the fur of her right tail. Callie, was that uncomfortable? No, not my tail, Kayla said nervously as he circled the tub. I'm just worried about upsetting or offending you. How so? Syntholo said as he reached for her left tail. I'm not attracted to you in your Terran form. He flashed her a quizzical look. Why would that bother me? Kayla brushed brightly. Your other form. Syntholo laughed as he started soaping up her left tail. What's so funny? She snapped. I think you misunderstand, Syntholo smiled. Would you refuse to associate with me if I was in one form or the other? No, Kayla scoffed. Then I don't see a problem, Syntholo snickered softly. We can decide whether or not to take action, but sexual attraction isn't something we have control over. Kayla sighed with relief, laid back and enjoyed the feeling of his hands on her tail. Whatever the psychological block had been, it seemed to be easing up. Both of her twin tails seemed to be responding properly after being washed. Feeling better, he asked as she stretched both of her brown tails and let them hang over the edge of the tub. Are you comfortable with me carefully washing your last tail, or shall I move on to your legs? Legs, but start with my feet. Instead of dealing with her legs one at a time, he moved to the bottom of the tub and washed them segment by segment, foot, ankle then calf, alternating from her right to left as he proceeded. Their conversation became more fluid. While there were still significant gaps in her memory, she told him what she could about her creation, leaving out any references to Cletheria, about her mothers, her brother, the mission to Farpoint. Before long, Kivaza joined in and talked some about her time on Midguard, culminating in discussion of the day of her transformation. Syntholo chuckled softly. So that orange stain on the floor near the elevator? That's the one, Kayla laughed. It's a good thing I threw up, otherwise that ambrosia overdose probably would have been the end of me. I smile every time I see that stain and remember standing there. So out of my own head that I started arguing with my own vomit. Between you and me, I'm pretty sure I lost that one. Syntholo laughed heartily as his hand moved the sponge across the seam between her thighs, just below her crotch. Her body reacted before she was even aware she was moving. She couldn't even tell which of her souls was in control of her body. Syntholo gasped for air, each of his arms pinned to the floor by one of her brown tails. The stinger of her black tail was poised at his throat. Her left hand grasping, claw-like at the center of his chest, as if intending to tear out his heart, one foot on his hips, her right fist behind her back swinging downward toward his face. The water from the tub landed on her back before she could strike, breaking her momentary murderous impulse. I'm so sorry, Kayla said in shock and dismay as she leaped off of him, colliding with the back of the tub. I have no idea what that was. Small patches of suds drifted, like clouds, as the water continued to spread outward across the floor around the tub. I think you have your strength back, Syntholo said as he sat up, rubbing the back of his head. So much for bath time. I think it's time you tell me what happened. I can fix this, Kayla said urgently. I'll just use my abilities to put the water back into the tub, and we just pretend none of that happened. No, Syntholo said in a firm, yet compassionate voice. Whatever happened, happened. The question is, what are you going to do next? I'm done with all the stalling and evasion, Callie. You're acting like a woman who was sexually assaulted. Give me a reason not to shove him out of the closest airlock. I'll tell you, Kayla said nervously, but not here. Someplace where we can have complete privacy. Where? Let's dry off and I'll show you.